Hey Double O's, it's Blake over at Bond Life Chicago with a unique and special Double O fight breakdown. Today, I am here with two special guests. I'm here with Alex Lamas. You might know him better from his YouTube page, Always Say Yes to Adventure. He's also got an Instagram, Sifu_Lamas. And then JT, who is on Instagram, ends period in period seven. Pretty cool Bond themed Instagram page as well. Make sure to check them out. I'll put their links in the video as well. But why don't you guys both kind of introduce yourselves a little bit of a background, and what makes you, as well as all three of us, an expert in the fighting styles of James Bond. Alex, if you want to start.
All right, I'll start. I am well, the Sifu Lamas should give a little bit of the way. I'm a professional martial arts teacher. I've been practicing and studying martial arts pretty much all my life, and the past 28 years I've been doing what's called Fujiao Pai Kung Fu, which is essentially Tiger Claw Kung Fu,
Very cool.
and it's my profession. It's my full-time job is teaching Tai Chi, Kung Fu, as well. I mean, Kung Fu and Tai Chi as well. I'm doing a lot more Tai Chi nowadays for various reasons, but still martial arts.
Awesome. Very cool. And you've been a lifelong or most of your life a Bond fan as well, so you're kind of
Oh,
familiar with most of that as well. Awesome. And
mhm.
JT, how about you?
So at this point in my life, I am studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I find that invaluable to my life. This struggle is something that I didn't have for a long time. I previously in my career, I was a Secret Service agent. So, you know, rolling around, wrestling, fighting was part of my career. And after I left that career, I found myself getting out of shape. I wasn't as explosive. I couldn't move as fast. I wasn't as flexible. So I'm a big UFC fan, and I got back into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu just as a means to challenge myself and to slow the aging process down.
Yep.
To keep a certain level of toughness, to keep a level of humility, because BJJ will humble you every single day you hit the mat. So
Yes.
that's where I come from.
Awesome. Very cool. And obviously you're, given your Instagram, you're also a big James Bond fan, lifelong Bond fan as well.
I am. So James Bond's number was 007. Mine
Yep.
was 6497. So we both ended in seven.
Perfect. Awesome. You got a better badge number than me then. I just got a random number when I got assigned my badge number in law enforcement. I just had to pick a new favorite number basically, but I didn't get it to end in seven.
Gotcha.
And the jujitsu is off. Like I train jujitsu as well. It's definitely one of those things where it's me and Alex have talked several times, and he liked to learn, but he also doesn't want to roll around on the ground with people in precarious in positions, and I can't blame him for that either. But it's definitely one of those things in law enforcement, especially. It's very pertinent to the job, and I agree with that for sure. How
What's
about? Oh, go ahead.
no, I was saying, but unfortunately or unfortunately, I started going back into judo, and if you know that at least 25% of judo is jujitsu is ground fighting. It's
Right.
out of judo, so I'm doing that now, whether I like it or not.
Now you either throw somebody or get thrown to the ground before you do the jujitsu.
Yeah.
We'll start with you this time, JT. How about before, like I usually like to do little icebreakers. What is since we're going to be doing the fighting styles of Bond today, your all-time favorite Bond fight out of all of the movie fight scenes?
That's a tough one. I would I would probably say the train, the penultimate scene in From Russia with Love,
Mm-hmm.
Connery fighting on the train. It's close quarters. They're contained. There's not a lot of room to move. There's not a lot of room to make distance. And that really resonated to, how fights go. Like sometimes you just are stuck with the environment you get. So I always really like that scene.
Awesome. And how about you, Alex?
That's a tough question because there's so many good ones. Um, the one that has always stuck with me is the fight with Slate in Quantum of Solace. I mean, the
Yes.
totality of it, But then the technique that's also in there, you can, if you know what you're looking at, you can see that there was a lot of technique in there. But just short, fast, brutal, unbelievable, fight scene. But yeah, the one in From Russia with Love is iconic.
Yeah, and that so mine is also, and we kind of talked about it a little bit off screen. Mine's also the From Russia with Love train car fight scene, and it's not as much of technical fighting like the fight in Quantum of Solace is, but just the sure like brute force, and it's very clearly a fight to the death, and the grunting and the faces that they make as they're doing that fight, and I never noticed it really until somebody pointed out on a different podcast, I believe, or YouTube video, that there's actually no soundtrack in that fight. They basically just let the fight itself kind of speak for its words, and I think it does a great job of that for sure. So with that said, the fighting styles of Bond. Obviously, we've got 25 movies to go through, 26 or 27 if you want to count a couple other ones. But obviously, through the decades, the style kind of changes. But being in his spot, 007, License to Kill, he's got to have a lot of different ways to be able to defend himself, and then also use force on somebody if need be. We'll kind of start at the top. What are some of the things that either of you guys see from Connery's era as far as his fighting styles in general?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of that came out of the stuntmen of the time.
Right.
Stuntmen that they had some karate experience, judo experience. They had military fight training experience, but essentially a lot of it is very much Hollywood, kind of what we used to call Hollywood haymakers.
Right.
Big moves, huge swings. Not to diminish it, some of those fight scenes are incredible. The one from is it where he fights Uvar, when he's dressed as a woman.
Oh yes, Thunderball, the beginning of Thunderball.
So in Thunderball, that's an amazing one. That's just a brutal fight.
Yeah.
And that was Bob Simmons, who's also doubles for him in the Gun Barrel. So that was one of the original guys, Bob Simmons. And that fight is just gnarly.
Yep.
So they don't lack intensity. But there's no actual martial art there.
Right.
It's pretty much Hollywood stunt fighting. But the intensity of it, especially the one in the From Russia with Love, again, doesn't lack intensity. So
yeah, very vicious, but it's not, like you said, it's not any technical striking or blocking. It's more so just kind of throwing big punches because we want to make sure that you see it on the big screen.
It was definitely made for the screen.
Yeah. What about you, JT? What do you think?
I would agree with Alex. I think some of the earlier Connery movies had better choreography in the fights, and as you got later in the canon, and you only live twice, and even in Thunderball, like the movements are really exaggerated. Like he's lifting up somebody's arm and trying to hyperextend that shoulder to do a throw, and that's clearly meant for the camera and not for what's going on. And going back and watching some of them, he would have a villain in kind of an arm lock, but he didn't have that elbow extended
all the way in,
out. And from what we've done, right, that bad guy's just going to get his arm back, but
right,
it has to be right for the camera.
And I think too, like Alex said, like part of it I think was just part of the time. They didn't all know, some of they were either know karate or they know some military experience, but they didn't know a lot of the other technical fighting, where some of the judo stuff, maybe somebody had seen it once or twice and they wanted to throw that move in there, but they might not have been complete experts in it, where now you can find an expert somewhere, anywhere around the world, fly them in and do some stunt training to try to teach somebody some choreography if they're able to learn that stuff too. I think it's just part of the times too, where karate was the main kind of thing back then, and until it got to the 70s, 80s, where kung fu movies were a little bit more famous, that it kind of evolved a little bit better to faster, more technical types of fights and stuff like that. But I thought, and again, we kind of talked off screen, and it kind of was out of my mind before this, but the Diamonds Are Forever elevator fight scene was some decent. It looked like there was a decent kind of back and forth. And Alex, you probably know a little bit better as to what type of fighting style it was with the striking back and forth. But that one is, again, Connery kind of being up in age a little bit, but that was one of the more technical fights I thought that he had.
Yeah, it's interesting with that one because by that time Connery started a Kyokushinkai karate.
Okay.
This guy Joe Robinson, who was the guy who played Peter Franks, with the guy, not under, but with him,
Yeah.
he got brought in there partially because he was in the class with Connery and said, "Oh, come do the fight scene in the elevator with me." He was also the guy who trained Honor Blackman in judo.
Oh, awesome.
Look at your book; you'll see his name in there.
I'll have to peek at that part. But yeah, that's pretty cool. And he's big enough size too that it looks like he's a sizable opponent for sure.
Yeah, that's probably the first time you're going to see some martial art techniques creeping in, isn't that the elevator scene?
Yeah, definitely. Nice. And then obviously next we get. Does anybody else have anything else on Connery? Kinda.
No, well, with that elevator scene, I like that the improvised, when the glass broke and the baddie took the shard of glass from the elevator and using that as an improvised weapon, that added realism to, like they're going to grab and use anything they can, especially when they're losing, that we've now introduced an edged weapon. So that made that scene stand out for me as well.
And go ahead, Alex.
Well, the first punch is thrown is that he winds up for a punch and he ends up breaking the glass.
Yep. Gives away his move.
Yeah, because he's not used to the tight space, and and then the fight starts.
Yeah, and kind of going off of what you said, JT, just in all of the fights, books or movies, Bond's always very aware of his surroundings, and he even uses things to his advantage as well against larger opponents and things like that, and he's able to make whatever is around him a weapon if need be to kind of get through that brutal fight. But I thought the choreographer did a really good job with that, where he grabs the glass. That they found again a kind of realistic way to use the elevator door to kind of slam it away and keep it from getting cut too. So next we get Lazenby, obviously. A little bit more actually trained in martial arts prior to becoming Bond. So we get him to actually do some pretty decent fight scenes, I think, for the most part on his own. I think he was the one doing those moves. And they made him pretty realistic, other than kind of playing them in fast forward when they put him on the big screen. But what did you guys think of his one outing as Bond and his fighting style?
Well, I mean, I'm going to give it up for my guy Lazenby because he really did sell it. I mean, turns out he did have he might have, it's unconfirmed, but he probably had a black belt in Shotokan even before he showed up. Afterwards, he did get some training from Bruce Lee in Jeet Kune Do, but that wasn't. It was after the Bond film,
right?
But I mean, I was looking at some of his fight scenes today in preparation for this, and he's like in most of it.
Yeah, and they all. The thing I like about those fights too, going back to the realization of it, JT, is they all flow. Where a lot of these cinematic haymakers, it's one big punch and then everybody kind of regathers, and then it's another big punch or a block, and it's because he was actually trained in martial arts, he's able to go kind of move to move and kind of make it look like he knows what he's doing, but it makes it look like Bond knows what he's doing to somebody that kind of knows how to fight.
I would agree. He looks more fluid, and less choreographed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was very, like I said, I was watching the beach fight scene and I was watching the hotel fight scene. And like I said, he looks like he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
He really sells it well. And you could feel like this guy can fight.
Yeah. I think the only downfall is that he didn't get another, for whatever reason, he didn't get another chance. But I think if his he would have had a second shot at it, the fights would have just gotten better, and who knows what would have been from there. But the fight scenes in the first one were awesome, that's for sure. And then I think one of my favorite parts about that too is again seeing an interview somewhere with the guy that he's fighting in the beach for the most part, because they takes on like 2 or 3 guys, but the one guy was they that is fighting with him in the ocean.
Parents Mountain.
Yeah, they basically was just like go beat the hell out of each other. Like go make a good fight. Like it wasn't really too much. Maybe they choreographed it between the two of them, but I think that they were just supposed to just go out there and whoop some butt and kind of see what happened from there.
Mhm.
And then I think you've actually mentioned it before, Alex, with because well, I think we skipped over it a little bit with Honor Blackman, but Diana Rigg is one of the first, obviously, women to show any actual martial arts in one of the Bond films, and then Honor Blackman with a little bit of judo, but Diana Rigg showed some, I believe, kung fu, right?
Yeah, she's in the Guinness Book of World Record as the first person ever to display kung fu on Western television. 2 years
Is that
before
the Avengers?
what?
Is that in the Avengers?
Yes, in the Avengers, and she did it 2 years before Bruce Lee got Batman.
Okay.
So, officially, the first Westerner and the first person to show actual kung fu on Western television.
And she was also the predecessor to, or not she replaced Honor Blackman on the Avengers. So both of them were kind of, Honor Blackman obviously being a black belt in judo, they both kind of knew what they were doing in those roles and kind of followed each other's footsteps in that aspect. The next part's probably going to be kind of quick, but obviously Roger Moore. We got a little bit to talk about, but 7 movies and some fighting in there. But that one's, for me, this one's a little bit rough to watch, some of the fight scenes. But what do you guys think?
When you say rough to watch, I was thinking about the fight scene where he pulls like the can of deodorant or hairspray and sprays it in the guy's face. He's but Connery also did that with a fire extinguisher in an earlier movie. Like, so
Right,
there's
right.
all improvised weapons are not equal, I guess, Roger Moore, what struck me about his fights are multiple opponents, right? So if you're fighting a couple people at the same time, right, you want to keep moving and you want to try to stack them up. You want to put one in the way of the other. And all his opponents were really polite and waited till he was done the first one before they approached him.
Yes, definitely.
That happened movie after movie.
This is Sir Roger Moore. He one-on-one opponents only.
Exactly.
I was a huge fan of The Saint before even James Bond. So when I saw Roger Moore as Bond, I was like, that's not James Bond. That's the infamous Simon Templar. If you watched The Saint, he did some great fight scenes. He boxed. He did some, but again, he was probably 10, 15 years younger.
Right.
But he did some serious fight scenes in the Saint. By the time he got to James Bond, it really kind of got scaled down. I was watching the fight scene from one of my favorite films, but the Spy Who Loved Me, where he fights that bald guy on the roof.
Yes.
And for some reason, I kept thinking of the Star Trek episode where Kirk fights the Gorn, and the Gorn's like real slow, because it's one of the slowest fight scenes you'll ever see.
Yeah, it's that one's in particular, and because Roger Moore is, a taller, slender man, and then that opponent is just like a shorter, stockier guy, and it's like this is silly to watch.
It's not. Yeah, it's not choice.
I will defend him fighting Yafet Kato in Live and Let Die. Like, Yafet Kato was a legendary actor, and he did everything he could to sell that fight. He was a really big guy, and he did his best to sell it. So sometimes Roger Moore really depended on the quality of his opponent. Having someone in Connery's area like Oddjob who knew how to fight could sell it better.
Right.
And for better or worse, I just, the only more fights I really liked were the Jaws ones because they were so ridiculous.
Yeah.
If at that point, and like you guys both touched on it, I think not that he's a bad actor or that he's a bad fighter, like you said in The Saint, but I think it's
Oh,
just
killer in the
we
same.
we kind of replaced Connery was aging out, and then we got Lazenby for one, and then we got Moore, who's pretty much the same age as Connery,
2 years older.
even
Was
yeah,
it
and
really?
so
Yeah.
it's it's he's still pretty much physically capable, just the same as Connery was, if not more or less, just by a tiny bit, and it gets to be, you know, obviously his era of Bond was a little bit more humorous anyway, but it gets to the point where the fights just aren't as fancy as what they could have been. But we'll touch on it too. It's the elephant in the room, of course, but he's in Korea, or no, Thailand, and he
Oh,
is at a karate dojo, which because they all train karate in Thailand, of course, but right. And you just went there recently. You got to hang out or see that
I,
that area, right?
I found the dojo. I was in the dojo. I found the place where they filmed it, and
Awesome.
it looks exactly like it does from the film. It's the exact same space. Pretty good size space, but yeah, bonkers scene because you have these guys in karate dojos, but they're all different colors that wouldn't even have existed. You have
Right.
a Chinese guy up there as the teacher, but he's clearly Chinese in his clothing. Then you have two guys come out in what seems like Thai clothing, and they do like Kali Eskrima kind of a fight, and then it goes into karate. I don't know. I don't. it's,
And then
it,
you get two teenage girls that come out and just kick the entire school's butt.
who are from Hong Kong and are from the Hong Kong Kung Fu system.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe that was it. They were just learning the wrong martial arts at that school the entire time.
I don't know.
Is that like an homage back to the gypsy fight and from Russia with Love?
That could be maybe a little bit.
Yeah, which was a pretty good fight.
Yeah, that was decent. That was a decent fight.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Any other stuff on Moore? I think we got most of that out of the way.
Yeah.
Also, not a whole lot, I don't think, but Timothy Dalton next, obviously, I don't think he did a bad job with what he did, but there just wasn't a whole lot of, like specific fight scenes in his era. I didn't feel like a lot of his was like hanging off of a vehicle and punching somebody and stuff like that versus like technical fighting for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
do you guys think?
Hollywood kind of fighting. Great stunts, great films. He's my favorite James Bond in terms of Bond. It's the most like the Fleming Bond, But yeah, you're right. Just when I'm looking through all the fight scenes, the Timothy Dalton ones don't really stand out that much because there's not anything that memorable or specific. I mean, they're great scenes.
Right.
The one on the hanging out of the airplane. But there's not, there's nothing specific to really latch onto.
Right. The only one I can really think of was the jail one, but it's not, again, even that there's a lot of, gimmicks more or less. Same with the Roger Moore one. It's very gimmicky type fights. Which, there's not a whole lot of technicality to it, but he did a good job with what he had. It's just there wasn't a whole lot there. I think he would have been more capable in the fight scenes that Brosnan had than Brosnan was, in my opinion. But I guess we'll get to that here in a little bit. But what about you, JT?
Nothing really stood out for me either. I mean, and one of the movies was basically a Miami Vice movie. It was that era.
Yep.
That's what they were going for. So I really don't think any of the fight scenes stand out.
Yeah, I agree. It very awesome stunts and whatnot, but it just wasn't fight specific really. And then on to Brosnan. So what do you guys think about the Brosnan era fights? There's a couple decent ones in there.
Mm-hmm. GoldenEye, the end of GoldenEye, that fight in
The Satellite Bowl.
the satellite bowl. Yeah, brilliant, just brutal.
What I liked about that is, Bond's fighting Trevelyan. They were trained the same way by the same people, so their fighting styles were, they knew what the other one was going to do.
Right.
So no one had an extra trick up their sleeve. It was just who wants it more and who still has the skill.
Yeah, who's going to end up on top? Who's the better man, really? Because they are presumably they have the exact same training for the most part. Yeah.
And if you're in that role, you've probably fought together or fought each other for years.
Yeah, you'd think so, and even just like more like a sibling rivalry, even to a certain point of that. But yeah, I think,
And that's how it was in my career. You'd end up fighting this, your buddy, and then he'd pull something new on you. And the next time you'd be in the mat room, you'd be like, "You're not gonna do that to me again."
Yep.
You learn really quickly.
Yeah. Well, and then even now, so in martial arts, that you get caught with something with one of your friends, and if they're a good partner, it's after that match, it's what was that cool new move that you just
That was
got me
awesome.
with,
Yeah.
and can you show me what that move is so that I can pull it off on somebody else? Don't use
Yeah.
it on me, but I'll show it to you for somebody else. But yeah, I think that one was definitely, that's probably his top fight scene, because again, a lot of them were, I think, kind of gimmicky, and I think Brosnan is one of the ones that looked the most Bond, but at the same time, maybe fighting wise, and again, kind of where the movies were at that time, they didn't have to up their game really until they got to the Craig era with how technical the fights were. Because, and we'll roll into it, obviously, the Bourne movies kind of came out at the same time that the Craig era started, and at that point, you've got guys like Tom Cruise and then Matt Damon doing some pretty fluid technical fighting styles in these spy and action movies, and obviously Eon and Bond had to kind of up their game, and I think they answered the bell, that's for sure. I think that they definitely brought us some pretty good technical fights with the Craig era. But what do you guys think about that overall?
I was actually, in preparing for today, I was thinking about the Jason Bourne scene where he was fighting multiple guys in the stairwell at the Waterloo train station. And he was stacking people up, right? He was trying to put one guy in front of the other, and I thought that was a really well choreographed scene. And you're right. So when you get to the Craig era, also for me, there's an aesthetic part of it too. So, like, if you're a fighter, like, you're gonna have the traps, you're gonna have the back muscles, you're gonna have the shoulders, and sometimes, like Pierce Brosnan fighting Xenia Onatopp, like he's a really thin guy,
Yeah.
and it just took something out of the story for me, but then you have Craig who, comes in and he's a lot stronger and he can
Yeah.
sell like core strength in the wrestling, and we can get into more of it, but like he ends up on the ground, there's a rear naked choke, like, and the fights I've been involved with, in my career, most of them end up on the ground. I mean, they end up on the ground very fast. So that always took me out of it, like the straight up, punching, standing back, making room and trading blows. You go to the ground pretty quickly, and then you have to know how to operate there because it's a whole different game.
Yep, definitely. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, and I was very impressed. They got one of the founders of Krav Maga to train him for the film.
For Casino Royale, the first one. Yeah.
Because as the films progress, they actually had the stunt coordinators actually had a plan for Bond throughout the films. They wanted his fighting style to evolve actually through each film as it went on. So they started with Krav Maga. Let's just do like the most raw, what we can do. Yeah. Eventually, then they went into Kali, which is from the Bourne films. Most of what you see in the Bourne films is what they call Filipino Kali.
And that's with more of Quantum of Solace and that slate fight with the knife and all that stuff, right? From what I remember.
Yeah. And then when we got to Skyfall, I think it was his name is I forgot his name. Robert Yuan. He was a kung fu guy, so he started training him not to choreograph kung fu fights per se. They wanted to keep the fighting sort of like he has a style of no styles, which Bruce Lee would say, but to give him sort of that more grace of kung fu. And if you see the Shanghai fight with on the Shanghai with the what's his name
in the tower with Patrice, yeah,
you see a lot of low kicks, you see a lot of kung fu moves coming in there from Craig, and kicking the knees and these sort of low heel kicks, which is
stomping the legs out
of kung fu. So and he actually trained him in some kung fu and tai chi to sort of give him that fluidity. So they had a plan with those three films, at least with those three films, of his development of fighting styles.
Yeah, the progression as his career went on also. And I looked at your own notes that you had sent me. The name was Roger Yuan.
Roger. Yeah, Roger.
But that's cool too, that it's more realistic. Obviously the Craig era had its own difference, that it was a progression versus just standalone films, but that they had that plan to kind of progress his fighting styles. What was it you were going to say, JT?
I was going to say Alex made his point made so much sense. So watching the pre-title sequence of Casino, and there's one point where he's fighting the guy in black and white in the bathroom, and he goes to kick, but he doesn't step just right. He's a little off balance as he goes to throw the kick, versus we get to Skyfall and he knows how to reset and find a center of balance much better. So I had never thought of that, Alex, till now that you'd mentioned that. One thing I would like to say, and I have a prop for this one, is after the stairwell fight in Casino, he gets back to the hotel room, he's bleeding, he's still huffing and puffing and trying to recover himself. Anyone who's been in a real fight knows that 90 seconds, 2 minutes in, you are spent, right? Your adrenaline's going, you're completely anaerobic, you're not, you're every part of that fight. And then, even 20, 30 minutes later, you're still trying to get your breath and you're still sweating and your body's still trying to recover and come down from the adrenaline. And then he has his come here, crystal glass.
Cheers. Sorry, it's just water.
Cheers. Also water, but cheers anyways. Yes. Yeah, it's definitely, that's an eye opener that, that's, again, all these fights in the scene throughout the series are super brutal. But yeah, if you're in a real fight, you're going to have that adrenaline rush, and then you're going to have that adrenaline dump, and you're going to just be in full on recovery mode for who knows how long.
Yeah. And you get home and you can't sleep because you're replaying your head and your body wants to crash, but your nervous system is not letting you do that, and it's a real thing. Yeah.
And even more so so I think back on some of the times where if I'm driving, an officer is already called that they need backup because of a fight, and you're flying their lights and sirens, and you can hear on my dash cam, I'm already not doing it on purpose, but mentally I'm already trying to just get as much of that oxygen in as possible to try to calm that down as much as possible, because my adrenaline's already starting to spike knowing that the fight's going to be on when I get there, and hoping that everybody's okay. But yeah, that's definitely a real thing. That's for sure.
I have to say, that's one thing different from you guys and me. I mean, I've been in hundreds, maybe even 1,000 fights. None of them real.
That's not a bad thing either. That's not a bad thing.
Ever with sparring and tournaments under controlled conditions, the worst I ever got was maybe a fractured rib and a fractured collarbone and some dislocated fingers, but never did I think, I might not walk away from this.
Right. But you still get the adrenaline jump from that as well.
yeah, but I don't know what it's like. I do not know what it's like, what you guys went through.
Right.
You would do better than you think because of the stress inoculation, right? If you
Practice it and
get
practice and
accustomed to
change
it, and
it. Yeah.
your nervous system gets used to it.
Yeah. All right. Back from a quick intermission. We're jarbled up a little bit into different positions in case you guys are wondering on the video. But kind of we're getting towards the end of the Craig era. Is there anything else that you guys had in mind for talking about with Daniel Craig's era as Bond and his fighting styles?
A little bit to touch on what JT brought up before about how, like, at the end of that stairwell fight scene, how, winded and bruised and battered. And what I did appreciate is that when I first read the books, and I didn't read the books until David Zaritsky's Bond Reading Challenge, I was really shocked and surprised how beat up he gets in the books. Like that, what you were talking about, JT, that happens in the books. I mean, he gets winded, he gets tired,
he gets knocked out sometimes.
He gets brutalized. Like half the books ends up with him in the hospital.
Yep. Yeah.
But I found one of the things when I was doing the research for the other thing was that in a couple of the books, especially Goldfinger, Fleming writes about martial arts really well, like too well. Like he knew that karate came from Chinese Kung Fu, and he writes that in Goldfinger. He knew a lot of the philosophy and the history. And I'm like, he had to know something. And I found that indeed he did study at some point something called Wei Chi Ru karate. Now, how long was he there? I don't know. Did he achieve any belt system? I don't know. But they do say that he was one of the people that he did take classes and lessons in karate. And when you read the books, it's like, yeah, definitely. There's no, in the 1950s, there's no way he could have known that information without taking lessons, because there was no outlet for it back then. Nobody knew except karate masters and kung fu masters who were teaching it.
And he does a really good job too in the books of, there are a lot of, Austin Powers makes fun of it, but there are a lot of chops and open hand strikes and palm strikes and things that would be more, realistic again.
Yeah.
And then again, and I've mentioned it with you before, Alex, but JT, where, in law enforcement, you can't always throw closed hands fists to hard parts of the body, because if you break your hand, you break your finger, then you can't use the other tools that you might need. And those open hand strikes or those chops at certain times are a lot more realistic and useful. And Fleming does a great job with some of that stuff. And then I think too, for the continuation novels, Raymond Benson does a very good job of some of that as well, with some of the martial arts in that as well. And then, so that kind of wraps up Craig. Obviously, we've already touched on it a little bit with some of the Bond girls, but some of the Bond girls might know how to kick butt better than Bond does in certain points. Honor Blackman doesn't have a lot to show for as far as fights, but she does get to throw Connery around a few times in that barn scene, kind of show off her judo. What do you guys think about that at all?
Yeah, the first half of that scene was pretty good. It doesn't end.
Yeah, we won't touch too much on that part.
Well, but yeah, throwing around pretty good, and I was very impressed that she knew judo and that she wrote that book. So yeah, in terms of in terms of Diana Rigg, she did show even in Her Majesty, she showed some of her kung fu.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit, but she's not a kung fu practitioner. She learned it for the films, and I'm sure she would be fun to say that.
And then same with Michelle Yeoh, where she's more of actually just a dancer, but she's so good at the choreography that she looks like she's a martial artist for 20 plus years.
Yeah. I was listening to an interview with Hugh Jackman, and he was talking about his upcoming Wolverine and some of the fight scenes that he had to do with Wolverine, and he said that it was actually his dancing that helped him more to sell how to fight than anything else. That it gave him the rhythm and the flow. And you know, when you look at Michelle Yeoh, she was a professional ballet dancer. Zhang Ziyi from Crouching Tiger, also a ballet dancer. There was another one back in the day called Chen Pei Pei, who was a big martial arts. She was a big martial arts star in the 1960s in Hong Kong, also a ballet dancer. I trained several ballet dancers back in the day and back in the Kung Fu school. And I would show them the form and they would get it like that. And I would
wow.
How that? It took me to get where you got in 6 minutes. And they're like, if I don't get it now, I don't eat.
Yeah, I'm not going to get a job.
Yeah, but they had no power. They didn't know how to throw a punch. When they threw a kick, they lifted their leg. When they threw a punch, they sort of extended their arm.
Yeah.
But, you know, a few weeks training and they start learning how to do it, and then they got it. You know, so screw them. But they look great.
Yeah, they look the part. It just might not have all the power behind it, but
they look amazing.
Nice.
Doing it.
Do you have a favorite fight scene with any of the Bond girls, JT?
I don't know if any really stand out. I mean,
not even
what's that?
Yeah, the bike shop one's pretty kick butt.
Yeah.
And the Paloma one.
Oh, the Paloma one. I forgot about that. Yeah, that would have to be it. Like what with Michelle Yeoh and then with Ana de Armas, like they both move so well.
Yeah.
And you know, when I went through training, there was a portion in South Georgia and there was a portion in Maryland. We got back to Maryland and we'd already been in training for 4.5 months. And we got back and it was like they took us back to tumbling class like you would take your preschooler to. And for weeks, we just learned how to fall and learned how to roll and learned how to get up off the ground. And that made us all more efficient when we had to fight, because when you're down, you know how to, and so I can translate that to, you know, if you know how, you know, I'm not a dancer, but if someone knows how to dance, they know how to move their body. They know how to have their core change directions. And I think that's the biggest part. You have somebody who can change directions with their core. That's what makes a professional athlete. That makes a good fighter. So it makes complete sense.
Yeah, definitely. So we're wrapping it up here. Thank you guys for your time. I got one last question for you guys, then I'm going to let you go. I think I might actually probably already know JT, so I'll wait. I'm going to have him go second because it sounds like him and I are probably a little bit in line. So we probably think the same way with what martial arts. But is there any martial art that Bond hasn't shown yet in a film that you would like to see him show proficiency in, Alex?
I mean, they showed a little bit of jujitsu in Casino. You know, he did that.
Right, the rear naked and then the collar choke.
Yeah, and in No Time to Die when he has the Cyclops guy in a. Yeah, that's a hard question to answer because they've done a little bit of everything.
Right.
I would love to see the next one get a little more down to basics in sort of judo and boxing. Just get it to get him do some real judo, real boxing. Just keep it simple, you know, and keep it kind of that kind of very kind of pure mixture of judo and boxing as he was.
Exactly. I was going to say, and pure Fleming. That's what his basis was then as well. Mm-hmm. How about you, JT? Same question to you. What do you think?
I would like to see a scene where it's less of a fight and Bond's going into small and large joint manipulation. Maybe he's got to retain this guy and keep him alive to question later, and they're in a crowded place and he can't make a scene. So he's using pain compliance in different ways, whether it's your wrist lock or doing some other pain compliance thing that kind of prop the guy up till they can get him interviewed, rather than a straight on fight, because it's more realistic. Like, you need to talk to this guy to get information. but how are you going to gain his compliance during that? I think that would be a clever plot device.
Yeah, like the what we would call like an escort lock or an
Yeah.
escort grip of some sort. I like that angle. I've never really thought of that before, but that would be, again, coming from a law enforcement standpoint, that would be cool. And of course, it would keep M happier that he's not killing all of their leads, of course.
Right.
Mine is, I know he's shown a little bits of jujitsu, and I guess it would probably go back to that joint lock. I would say I'd like to see a little bit more jujitsu stuff, but not in the essence where it's force, where he's doing like spinning arm bars or Kimuras and stuff. Like when they're doing that in the movies, it's like that's not going to be sufficient to what he's kind of doing in the real world type stuff. And that might pull off at a certain point in time, but that would be more the new version of like a cinematic haymaker, in my opinion. But I really like both those answers, where it's kind of the basics of going back to original Fleming Bond version, or that joint manipulation to kind of go from there. But any final words from either of you guys?
I'm really, really honored and happy that we were able to do this. I was going to say, the Bond community has their little niches all over the place. The style guys are, huge and
Yep.
prolific, and they're, doing their thing, going shopping, and then you have the food and wine guys, and they have their thing. And I always thought the action guys, where are they? Where are the action oriented guys?
Yeah.
Don't know anything about. I really don't know that much about alcohol, liquor. I don't really drink that. I hate shopping. I mean, and I want to learn how to dress well. It's one of the reasons why I watched the Bond Experience. And
Right. Right.
He gives very good advice. Able to do it on my own in any way. So it's nice to have that as a resource. But do I like shopping?
Not the activity of shopping. I just like having new clothes appear sometimes when they look nice.
Yeah. So it's great to start this community of, like, I would say, the action guys.
Yeah. Yeah. The men of action.
Yeah. So it's great to have JT here. I'm really glad that you were able to be a part of this, JT.
Thank you.
How about you, JT? Any last words from you?
There's so much to get into. I hope in the next movie they change up how he carries. He's got the shoulder holster, he's got the little slim line. I recently went through a training class where it was appendix carry, and for those who don't know what appendix carry is, you have a holster and you basically put it down the front of your pants. The reason I found this so fascinating is there was a lot of jujitsu in this, because if you're fighting and wrestling, that gun is on your center line and you can protect it better rather than being out here in the chicken wing like you see, or underneath your armpit. And so there are more things that Eon can explore with, evolving. I mean, James Bond evolved, fighting tactics evolve, how you carry a weapon evolves, these type of things where you can, if you're fighting, James Bond is fighting over his gun and it's in this position, then you're going to be more in a jujitsu stance trying to control, what you have on you. So I look forward to, hopefully they do something different. They evolve it, they grow it.
And I'll even go one step further with that. Anybody who sees the shoulder holster and thinks it's cool, because it does look cool, but as anybody who's ever actually tried to pull that off, if those suit and tuxedo jackets get any smaller, even a Walther PPK is not going to hide underneath that armpit, because any gun that's bigger than a Walther PPK doesn't fit under a normal sizing jacket anyways. It's a cool way to carry a gun, but it's definitely not the concealable way of current times or the future, really. But thank you guys again. I had an awesome time. So great to talk with you guys. Like you both said, we've kind of found our own little group, our own niche here of the martial arts background guys, the guys that kind of look at the films from our same point of view. And I had a lot of fun kind of breaking down the entire series of Bond with you guys. Thank you guys for taking a little bit of time out to chat with me. I will put both your guys' info and links in the notes here. Make sure to check them both out on Instagram, and then Alex's YouTube page as well. As he said, he does a lot of cool, crazy stuff skydiving, scuba diving, more bond stuff than even JT and I do, but it's some cool stuff.
Alex puts out a video and I end up buying Rick Steves books. Like, I got to go there.
Yep.
Made
Yep.
gold. That was great.
Living vicariously through Alex sometimes, for
Exactly.
sure. But keep doing what you guys are both doing. Stay safe, keep training, and thank you guys again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.